there's this question that I've kind of been pursuing, is Bluesky a scam? And I thought, your note, out of everything I've read about it, I think your note sort of had a pretty balanced perspective on it, and you've sort of been in the space for a long time. And so, and a lot of the people in the space. So I kind of thought,
yeah,
let's just get together and chat about it and try, my goal is just, I want to get a better understanding of, the trade-offs and what is truth here and what's the likelihood of one to converge to the other, vice versa, So that's kind of, in a sense, my starting point, or where my head is right now. But yeah, first, thanks for writing what you wrote. I thought that was really cool and helped me think about it a little bit better.
Yeah, because I've been trying to think about, like, we have Nostr, we have Bluesky, and actually, one of the questions that Jack and I talked about was like, why choose Nostr over Bluesky? And Jack is supporting both protocols and everything else, but like, he didn't have to start supporting Nostr. He could have just stayed with the support of Bluesky. And I've on and off been involved with the discussions about Bluesky since before it was announced and before it was picked who would run it. And I engaged in a bunch of the discussions about how it should be run and wrote up proposals for how it should be run and what, and it was a way too slow process. Like, it took Bluesky should be a year or two further along than it is because of how hard it was to get it out of Twitter and incorporated and funded. And it wasn't a person's priority, but what I see is that, one, Bluesky is a real project. There's real code. You can see the real code there.
Yep.
And they're as committed to openness and open source technology and open protocols as everyone in the Nostr ecosystem. Paul and Jay have been doing this a long time. Paul was one of the creators of Secure Scuttlebutt. He was very involved with creating DAT and Beaker browser. Like, he's been doing open protocols and open source technology for a long time. And Paul Frazee is really the de facto architect of Bluesky. There's lots of people contributing it. But now, the difference between Noster and Bluesky's app protocol is that Bluesky started out with all this attention, like press coverage and attention and media, and it's Twitter's new thing and it's going to be big. And so immediately all these people rushed in and said, let me run Bluesky. I'm going to do it. And including a lot of like every shitcoiner you could imagine, to use a Bitcoin term. Like I know you do it on my blockchain or this blockchain or that blockchain. Right. And also people who were involved who, weren't, lots of people had agendas. Some of those agendas were good. There's a big discussion. Should Bluesky be built on top of the Matrix protocol? Because you could definitely do that. And, the original federation of Twitter was built on XMPP, and Matrix is a descendant of XMPP. So it sort of made sense. And then they got some funding and worked as a 3-person team for about a year. Just putzing away, building prototypes, throwing things away, building prototypes. And all of that outside attention, I think, was too difficult to deal with. And so, even though they would release code, post it on GitHub, but like code on GitHub that doesn't have someone looking at tickets and writing, the contributing docs and the readmes and build files and everything else, it's not very useful. And so I think Bluesky, because of the attention, was pushed into a cathedral model of a few people, they're vetted, they get to participate in the designing of the system, and the larger world needs to be kept at bay because it's full of crazies.
Right.
And like all these people with all these agendas, you can't even sort out all the agendas and like who's actually going to do the work. And so, but on the other hand, Noster was, one, Fiat Joff was like, I think this is a cool idea. I've been playing with things, Scuttlebutt's kind of neat. Mastodon's kind of neat, but they've got their problems. Maybe I can build one myself. And, it was a scratch your itch type thing. And
were you talking to Fiat Joff around that early part when he was thinking about that?
no, I wasn't. I've talked to Ben Ark about sort of what the process was. And I was aware of Noster because very early on, people started posting about Nostr on Scuttlebutt. Mm-hmm. Like, there's like, hey, this other protocol, and it's kind of similar. What do you guys think? And just sort of a chat about it. But Nostr was allowed to grow and sort of, it had a fertile garden of people who had been working on Lightning and working on Bitcoin, and they wanted something to play with, and the Lightning stuff was working. So what's the next thing that we can play with? Oh, this social thing is kind of fun. And so there was an ability to have iterations of relay servers, iterations of clients that came and went, and people figured it out without a lot of like not being under a microscope. No one's like, and no one seeing any value in Nostr. Nostr didn't have any value until it took off. And so it got to work in that way. And I think that pushed the two projects further away apart and how they work. And so, when I looked at the two projects, it's like, I like Bluesky. I like a bunch of the designs, but it's kind of heavy. Like it's got some pretty intense specs, and it builds on other things that have heavy specs. And it's not the simplest thing that could possibly work. Right. And then what do we need to add? And so, I built my first Noster client in a day. I'm like, hey, this is cool. Let me build something. And lots of other developers did the same thing. You can't build a Bluesky relay, the PSD, in a day. You can't build a Bluesky client in a day because it's built on top of all these other things. And we always build software on layers. So, Bluesky is real, but I don't know if we're going to be able to make Bluesky flexible in the way that Nostr has all of these apps. So Scuttlebutt had all these crazy apps, and Nostr has all these crazy apps. There's the music apps, and there's micro apps, and there's, you're using the same graph and the code of content and everything else. And so the servers in Bluesky are stronger and more opinionated in how they do it to just do the needs of like cloning Twitter. And so that's going to make the building of all these other crazy apps, which is part of the fun of Nostr, really hard. Like, but it might make, it might make the just straight Twitter social like app easier.
Right. And so it looks like Bluesky, as best I can tell, is kind of almost like a full featured Twitter clone, which has a lot, it has discovery surfaces, and it has, search, and it has, notifications and stuff that maybe was not in early clients in Noster that is now kind of only, being worked on as sort of an open ecosystem with different people who are providing those different layers of value. And then Noster, I think of it as like this very raw, open, almost just like atomic units that you can compose into more things, but it's almost like very different ends of a spectrum. One is basically Twitter, but with a little bit of a plan toward getting it decentralized. And the other is like this new atomic unit of storing messages and relays, and then you kind of compose everything from that. So is there
absolutely
is that sort of fair characterization?
I think so. Noster is, small pieces loosely joined, and you get different parts of it, and a lot of it doesn't have the polish. Whereas Bluesky is, what if you rebuilt Twitter with open standards as an open source project, where you made services that replaced all the different layers in the Twitter stack, and
Mm-hmm.
made it so that at each layer you can have more than one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all distributed. It just means that, like, instead of having a singleton, there could be at least two providers.
Mm-hmm. And you can sort of rotate those providers out in some future version of it once there's kind of more of an open ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you need to be blessed or something, or somehow need to get approved to write, like if you want to write a new BGS server or a new PDS, which are kind of Bluesky concepts, do you need to go to the team and get permission to do that, or do they even have such a thing yet?
No, so they have the thing, it's called Indigo. You can download and install it. It's actually reasonably well documented. They've got an implementation in Go and another implementation in TypeScript. And you can download them and you can run them and you can set up your own servers, and people have done that. But at the moment, it's kind of like open source the way Signal is open source. So, I can go and download every part of Signal and set up my own Signal service and build my own Android and iOS app and desktop app for Signal and run my own Signal server and do my own, inside the secure enclave, do the contact matching. But it doesn't talk to the main Signal.
Right.
So
you're kind of creating a new siloed, isolated instance that isn't really interoperable in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and there are specs for how the interoperability should work. And, for a while, I was being pretty vocal, similar to how, not as explicit as Fiatjaf was saying, but I was calling people out. Both, I'm in all these different Signal chat groups, with people working on these protocols and some of the Bluesky folks and on Bluesky, because I've been on it for months, saying, hey, look, Bluesky at the moment, you have the idea of identities are portable and everything else, but there's a single signing key right now. Mm-hmm. And it exists on the single PDS, the single relay. And so you log in and you post messages, and the messages are signed, and there's a log, and there's a Merkle tree for the messages, and like you can request it. But like it's as if everybody in the network were using the same key, and then we just attach different identities to it. And so that's not a decentralized network at all.
Login and password, like an email login and password to sign that on behalf of that key, right?
Yeah, and the email login stuff was an intentional choice. So when they designed Bluesky, they said, key management is really hard. We don't think we want to teach people who are normal users how to do key management, how to do key recovery, how to back it up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say the key is yours, but it sits on our servers and you log in to password. And so then the server, of course, could sign any message on your behalf. But they promise in terms of service that the key is yours and you can move it to another server.
At some point in the future, if somebody
at some point in the future,
another server.
Yeah. Well, or when, the two server, like when you're allowed to federate so that messages could be delivered across servers, the same way stir fry can sync events. So when that is turned on, you should be able to take your key from server A and put it on server B. Now you're still logging in then to server B using a RESTful web interface to get all of your messages. And so it's a much smarter, like the power balance between the client and the server in Bluesky is much more heavily on the server side. Whereas Noster, we keep the relays super lightweight. And so I was calling them out saying, what the fuck? Like, you guys say you're building in a decentralized network and open things, but you're not even generating a separate key for every user. You have one key there. And like, they don't advertise that they have one key, but you can look at the code. And like, if you ask Jay or Paul, they're like, yeah, we don't have the multiple keys yet. So, and then, some folks back channeled to me and said, hey, wait, Rabble, just take a deep breath. We're supposed to roll out the first test net of federated servers. So I don't think it will be federated servers on what is Bluesky. The Bluesky app, but a separate network of multiple federated servers that you could also connect to. And they said that they'll roll it out next week. Okay. So I don't believe they'll roll it out next week because no software ships on time. But
right.
I did, like, that was enough for me to say, okay, I'm going to sit on my hands. I'm going to stop being too angry with you guys and stop denouncing it, because I know what it's like to ship software too. Sometimes things are hard. And if you're, and I downloaded the source code and built Indigo, the server, and ran it. And I'm like, okay, so, there seems to be a lot here. I looked at some of the federation code. I'm like, there's a lot of does it work? I don't know, because I didn't do 2 of them and set them up, but clearly they're working on it.
Right.
They're going to set up a test net. They're going to do that. We'll then have 2 app protocol networks. We'll have Bluesky, and then we'll have the open one.
Right.
But there's going to be a lot of incentive for Bluesky, the company, to not turn on the open network for their current user base.
Mm-hmm.
So,
meaning because they'll want to just hold them for some future business model?
I actually don't think it's a future business model aspect of it. I think it is the users who've joined Bluesky are just looking for a Twitter replacement. They just want Twitter back. They want Twitter back where they got the things banned, the people banned from Twitter who were banned before Elon Musk took over, and maybe even more. Like, they want
the default part of the experience has content moderation like built in, right? I walked through on the previous video I made today where I looked, and there's like, you can set all of your content moderation policies to like low, medium, high across, I think 8 or 12 different parameters. So do people want Twitter, like they actually want those features of Twitter too? They want kind of the content moderation are they looking for free speech? Are they looking, like, what do you think they're looking for?
So the Bluesky model is that there should be multiple services that do content classification and content moderation, and users should have the agency to choose which service does that. And that's a model I think that we should actually use in Noster as well. Whereas there's no universal thing here. You can run it without any content classification or moderation or reports, or you can choose to opt in to a system, some service or group of people that's doing the moderation. So I actually think that the idea of Bluesky doing it is right. But at the moment, there's only one moderation service. There's only one organization doing it, and you have no agency to choose a different moderation service or opt out of it entirely. And so, that's the biggest difference in many ways isn't what's the goal, because the stated goal of these two things are actually pretty similar, but the path that Noster's going is like, we've built this open network and then we're figuring out what constraints users are going to need and how we do it, and like to make the experience better, like push notifications or, the spam filters that Nostr band is running, or, Nostr wine, like, whereas Bluesky is going the other direction and starting with one thing and then like opening up and seeing what happens. And then the next thing, opening up and seeing what happens. Now, my fear is that the Bluesky user community and the organization will walk towards being open, and then scary things will happen and they'll like pull back. And, cause it's dangerous, cause it's scary. Because you have thousands of people yelling at you to ban what was the name of it? I wrote it down. Pepe heads. So there was some user called Pepe Hands who, was a 4chan person and they wanted to like get other 4chan folks on Bluesky to troll the Bluesky folks, and it's trolling. And Pepe Hands is a far right wing 4chan troll, and at first the Bluesky team is like, no, we're not banning this person. No one gets new invites because we don't know how to handle it, but we're not banning this person. And then eventually,
that was out of principle that they said not banning this person. That was kind of the
out of principle, out of free speech principles.
Okay.
And then the account was banned, but not because of what it was saying, but because they felt like it was attempting to do sort of coordinated brigading of 4chan users collecting Bluesky invites to like inauthentically, kind of a brigade style, like collective attack on the system or something. And so the account was banned for that, not because, it likes swastikas and Pepe the Frog. But, and I support the Bluesky team, like launching the thing with what they've got. It's great. Yeah. Like we want people to launch early and often and get out there. But we don't know which of these two solutions will work. And in Noster's case, we are worried about choke points of centralization. Right. But no one's like, oh, I really need to lobby Fiat Joff to do the next step of opening up.
Right.
Like,
so it sounds like,
and even if like he rejected a NIP or something, I could still implement the NIP.
Yep.
Like I could, make a repo, which is like Rabble NIPs. Yeah. I post the events and I document how I post the events, and I, talk to Will and Victor and everybody else, Stuart, building all these different clients and saying, hey, this didn't get adopted as a NIP, but we can still do it. And in Bluesky, it's the other way around, where we have to hope and wait and pressure them to follow through on their promises of opening up.
Right. So I would guess that they're pretty aware of this dichotomy of approach. They're aware of Noster and aware of sort of the trade-offs. And I wonder, like, just from your interactions with the Bluesky team, do you feel like they subscribe to any of the Noster principles or ideals, or do you think that they just have a very different worldview about how to accomplish what may be kind of similar goals?
No, I mean, so I think culturally there's a big difference between folks working on Bluesky and folks working on Noster. Just sort of, thoughts about worldview and politics and, libertarian politics and the central bank. But remember, Jay was a full-time developer on Zcash as her last full-time job before she switched to working on Bluesky. So it's not like she is an anti-crypto person. Like,
right.
If you look at her work, like, and so I would say that someone who's a Zcash developer and worked on the Zcash team would be entirely comfortable with all of the politics that exist and the sort of philosophy of organizing that exists on Noster. And Paul has been building open, decentralized systems for more than a decade and has produced a lot of these. And, some of these protocols that he writes don't work and everything else. And so I don't know about the larger community of users, but I do know that, like, the people who are core to designing it, there's a bunch of cryptographer folks who are just like math geeks, but it's Why Are You Sleeping, who is working on Protocol Labs. It's Jeremy Miller, who was the designer of Jabber and XMPP. It's, Paul Frazee and Jay Graver and Dan, I forget Dan's last name, but he was a Twitter person who came over. Like, those folks who are actually doing the work don't have a different philosophy of where they want to go than most of the Noster people. Like, there's a debate about you know, uncensorability and censorability and exactly how to do it. And there's a debate about strategy, but, you know, I think it is a bit unfair. I think Fiatjov was totally right to call out that, hey, why the hell are you guys doing this in this sort of centralized, unopen way? Is this real? Because we need to hold them accountable and make it real.
Right.
But I don't think that the Bluesky team is trying to build a centralized service that they're not trying to like build a company that just takes over Twitter and replaces Twitter with the exact same thing. Because
right. So they kind of have the same types of ideals, but I think you could sort of point to the fact that the Bluesky team has been around longer, right? And they sort of got their start. Well, I don't know if it's quite longer, but they've been a cohesive team while Fiatjov was kind of out on his own trying to wrangle up some kind of server relay and client developers. So they have a bit more, let's say, history of building in this somewhat centralized way without maybe knowing much about Noster's existence. Now that they've seen Noster and they've seen sort of the excitement around it, do you think that they would look at what they have versus what Noster is and kind of figure out, oh, we want to incorporate or adapt some of our ideas now that this thing is there? Or like would they ever say, oh, we should be a Noster client? Or do you think that's just unlikely? Like they're too committed to kind of exploring this other path?
I think they're pretty committed to exploring their own path. I think that, they absolutely knew about Noster because except that the first Bluesky report, which did get released, but like wasn't widely done, was, the first thing that Jay did was she coordinated amongst a bunch of us to write a report, which was an evaluation of all the important decentralized social protocols that existed at the time. And this report really came out before Fiatjov had done any development in Noster at all, or enough that it was something worth looking at, because there's lots of these little protocols.
Yeah. I saw your Airtable, so you've got 87 listed. I was impressed that there's 87 of them. I think I played with a dozen of them, and I thought I kind of had surveyed the space, but I wasn't close.
No, and occasionally I like try and like add more tags and like classify it, and then I'm like, I don't have enough time to spend it all the time building this stuff, and 20 of them are these academic ones where I can only find the papers about the protocols. I haven't even actually been able to find the code and build the code, but
right.
So they're aware of Noster, but they're also heads down in their own thing, and they were quietly working along on it and quietly sort of adding people, and then all of a sudden had a moment, and they have celebrities and politicians. And they had to, set a policy, which is like no heads of state.
Right.
Like, Biden, you cannot have an account. So they got much bigger, much faster than they were ready for.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the big things that's going to be interesting is like, Noster is super more flexible. Noster has zaps. Like, how does, they don't want a cryptocurrency the way any kind of Ethereum derived smart contract system would be. But, these are not folks who don't believe in blockchain cryptocurrency projects. And, these are folks who build on them and
right.
believe in privacy. So, will there be Lightning Network support? Will it be an add-on thing? Will you be able to record it? Will some of the clients start supporting it? I think likely, because I think you can do it, but I don't think, but I don't think it's going to be in the official Bluesky client.
Mm-hmm.
And I what I hope is that we get a gateway, like we have the Noster gateway between ActivityPub and Noster, between the two, because they're super similar. Like, there's no reason why I couldn't mirror my Noster posts onto a PSD and cross-sign accounts, and vice versa. And there's no reason why we couldn't be taking the Bluesky messages and mirroring them, signing them as Noster. And in fact, everything in Bluesky is open, so we could actually write a script that took all the Bluesky messages right now and took the signatures and reposted them as Noster events, which I think would be an interesting thought experiment.
And people are already doing this with Twitter posts. I saw recently, like, I think the Elan jet is now cross-posted on, I think, both Bluesky and on Nostr, if I saw right.
Yeah, but I think he's doing the cross-posting. It's not a server thing.
Okay. Is that what you did? Like, when I saw your post that was on both, you're just copy-pasting?
For me, when I post on both, I'm just copying and pasting. But then I go to Bluesky and it's like got a character limit, which is super annoying. So I often say more on Noster because I'm allowed to say more. And I think that and the Bluesky client, which I run, like the when you run it on a Mac on the desktop, you like can't resize the damn window. And so there's a web client, which is, roughly equivalent to any of the web clients that Noster exists on, but there's only one. There is a third-party client called Moot, which is a third-party. MOOT, which is in test flight right now. And so that's an alternative client that you can run on Bluesky.
So it's an iOS client, and I can use do I use like my Bluesky email and password? And then
you give this alternate client your username and password. It doesn't do OAuth. It then stores a copy of your username and password in that, hopefully your keychain, but I don't know. And then they log into the server, and then the server signs it on your behalf.
Oh, okay.
Which like totally inverts what anybody in Noster would do. Be like
right.
if we propose you do that in Nosterland, or it'd be like danger, Will Robinson, don't go,
Right.
There'd be, something on Noster's awesome thing like, don't use this app because it,
right. Worst thing ever.
It can harvest your logins.
But that's part of
But that's the way it works right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least that's how it works for now.
Yeah.
So
but
if you were
in the future, that server doesn't we could modify the PDS, not like Bluesky servers, so it didn't store the keys. And so the keys existed in your client or in so that it worked more like Noster. Like there's nothing in the system that would prevent you from signing locally and then transferring it to the server.
Right. And we have, I don't know if you played with Nostr Wallet Connect, but that's kind of a component that somebody built that's meant to serve that function kind of across Nostr clients, right? So I think with the there's
two Wallet Connect protocols in Nostr.
There's two different ones? I saw like Albi and was there Nostr Wallet Connect? I don't know if that's by the Albi team or if that's a separate product.
So Nostr Wallet Connect's the one by the Albi team, which is really cool.
Okay. And I saw Will sharing some screenshot that he was integrating it because it was the only one that I think he thought was good enough right now.
Yeah, and it's definitely in our it's our roadmap to do it in Nos too, Nos Social, because we don't want to build a wallet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the nice thing about the kind of bazaar model is that you can focus on just the stuff that you're doing, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Open source kind of solves that for you.
Yeah.
Right?
I like the bazaar model. The bazaar model is what gave us HTML and JavaScript and PHP and CGIs for dynamic web pages, and it gave us all the fun stuff.
Are there any examples where the Cathedral model has proven to work for kind of open source or kind of internet ecosystems?
Android Android is a
Okay.
Cathedral model. Like, it is open source. You can fork it. It's under an open license. I would say that Firefox is developed that way. WebKit is developed that way.
Mm-hmm.
Darwin, which is the core of the Mac OS operating system,
Mm-hmm.
is a Cathedral model. Like, they all have sort of big companies behind them funding them, much bigger
Do they
than
end
Blue
up
Sky.
having vibrant, kind of vibrant developer communities contributing, or like they're open source, but do they end up being able to instigate other contributions?
Not really. I mean,
Right.
so the contributions that happen tend to be people who their job needs it. And so it's like, we use WebKit for our business and they use WebKit. And so we pay people on WebKit and then they go through because there tends to be more hoops to jump through to contribute. And
Right.
so,
Right. Right.
my hope is that we can kind of, that Blue Sky gets enough attention and people start forking it or they're able to build their own. But, I could say that IPFS is in some ways a Cathedral model because there's one libp2p and there's sort of one implementation of a bunch of their protocol stuff. And there's different libraries and clients and a bunch of people build on top of it, but it's a, fairly constrained. And maybe Bitcoin Core is sort of similar too, because it's a fairly constrained, fairly slow moving,
Right.
they're not, you can fork it and do stuff, but like there's consensus on the one.
Right. Which is kind of part of the
Which
design of the software. It's
people
not
are
meant
concerned
to-
about, but yeah.
Right. But like
It's
with
not
money,
meant to be
it's kind of a
exciting.
global, right. You want your money to be boring and kind of steady.
Yeah.
You've decided now to build on Noster, right? So you've been building on Noster for a while at this point. Is that right?
Yeah. Since January, we've been working on it. Yeah.
And your whole team now, because you're a team from, I think, is it right, from Planetary Social? You guys are now all full-time Noster developing.
Yep. Planetary is an app. It's open source. It's still running. People still use it. I still open it sometimes and play with it because it's got a network of people behind it. But we're entirely building Nostr apps and Nostr solutions. Maybe at some point in the future, some of the like backend services, like maybe something we build for Nostr could also plug into Blue Sky, into the app protocol. But I can trust Nostr because there's no decision that someone running Nostr can make that could take Nostr away from me.
Right.
And, and I trust the people behind Blue Sky as people and because they're friends and because I know their working history. But if, for example, someone came along and said, here's $10 billion to stop releasing the open source thing and update your servers so that they're incompatible, they might take it.
Right. Right.
And so,
It sounds like they'd have quite a steep mountain to climb to convince you to build in their ecosystem. Is that right?
Well, yes, and I don't even know how I would build in their ecosystem. Like I could build a client, but the entire point of this system is that like I can take my Nostr identity and drop it into all these different clients and all these different apps that do different things and work in different ways. And that's what I wanted. So when I started working on Decentralized Social, I wanted us to go back to the world of the Facebook app platform and the Twitter API, where all sorts of developers were coming up with all sorts of crazy ideas and you didn't need permission to do them. And you had access to this messaging protocol and this social graph and this ability for things to go viral and to get users. And that was a moment where it was like super creative. and people were building all sorts of things. And some people built, like Zynga, really big businesses on that. And then Facebook and Twitter said, oh, we want to shut this all down and make it an advertising market, and we want to control the experience. And so all of a sudden, you like no longer trust that. And so I want that. I want that crazy space by which we can have a lot of different apps. And at the moment, that space exists on Noster and doesn't on Bluesky, and won't on Bluesky until you could use and run Bluesky. And if Bluesky, the team, went evil or disappeared, it would all keep going. And so, I think that until the point at which they don't have a choke point to like turn it off, then you can't trust it. And you can trust Nostr.
So let's imagine.
And so I'm going to build on the one you can trust.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's do just a brief thought experiment. Let's say that you were CEO of Bluesky, knowing everything you know about kind of what the Bluesky work has been so far, and kind of what the Nostr ecosystem is, and sort of what's going to attract developers. Do you believe there's like a path that you could take to sort of attract, as CEO of Bluesky, could you attract, the Rabble, of Nos Social? Or
I mean, so I don't think we can. Can we share a screen? Yeah.
Do you want to share screen? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I would do if I were CEO of
oh, look at that.
Of Bluesky. And this is the proposal that I wrote before Bluesky LLC was founded for how I would have structured it. And that, and of course, this is a couple years old, and it's, assumes that Twitter is part of it, everything else. But I actually propose that there be two organizations. There be a company, which is like Bluesky LLC, Bluesky Labs, and then a foundation that I was talking about being structured under, say, the Linux Foundation or one of these other open source, Apache, one of these sort of trusted open source foundations. And that the code would be custody under the foundation, and then you would go get other organizations to buy into the consortium of building it. And, here, there's Square Crypto right there, like about how you build the tools. And then, here's how I propose that we do trust and safety and the business model. And here's what the plan of action is of how you build in all the organizations. So like, if I were CEO of Bluesky today, the proposal would be different than the one that I wrote before it got founded. But I would have started with a much more structured, clear public engagement process. I think that if you look at the way Ubuntu handles open source, they do a much better job of working with a larger community, because Ubuntu works directly with the Debian community and did a lot of work to make sure that, things work upstream. And if you look at the way Automatic handles WordPress as an open source platform, yes, they have paid things and everything else, but they engage a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of staffing in that openness so that people would trust the platform. And so that's what I would do if I were like running Bluesky, is, I would sort of do a process by which we had people whose job it was not just to be developers, but engage a public, like, collaborative design process and figure it out and like make sure that the development of core pieces happened in parallel with people on the outside, and make sure that you had multiple versions. Now, they actually do have two versions of the PDS server, which is great. Like, and it's better than like Protocol Labs has done, and it's better than a lot of other people. But I think that there should have been a distinction between the company and the custodian of the protocol. And I think that we have organizations that handle custodians of protocol. And it's fine that Noster doesn't have one. It's just a GitHub group. Scuttlebutt was just a GitHub group. But I think given the money in it, that it should have been under the umbrella of one of these open source foundations. And that Bluesky, the company, should have built on the protocol. Which isn't,
in that model, would Bluesky, the company, be they would build a business like a WordPress business where they have like a hosted version of it,
exactly,
or some sort of other hosted client?
Yeah. But you could have, there are plenty of other businesses that run hosted versions of WordPress as well. And there's a whole world of people who make a living selling WordPress plugins and WordPress templates. Like, there's a lot of good businesses there. And I wasn't proposing that Bluesky didn't become a good business. But I think you needed to separate the ownership of the protocol and the core technology from the business that's doing it, because you have right now, we have to be worried that things might come out of alignment.
Right.
And Paul and Jay and Jeremy Miller and Why Are You Sleeping? They're all doing the right thing. They're all working in the right direction. They all have a great vision, but structurally, we're vulnerable to this sort of protocol capture. And that's my primary worry about Bluesky.
Not be in charge, and maybe it gets bought by some private equity company, and and they don't
exactly.
Even if they're well intentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean that the future is certain. You sort of need a little bit more certainty baked into it.
Exactly, and so I'm not saying that Bluesky won't get there. Like, potentially they'll release enough stuff and enough community will coalesce around it, and there'll be enough outside development that the center of power shifts. But what Mastodon shows us with the Fediverse is even a very poorly funded organization that has really good UX and strong branding maintains a tremendous hold over an open protocol. So 70% of the Fediverse is Mastodon servers, but there are hundreds and hundreds of others, and lots of them are really good. But what the Fediverse is held back by Mastodon because there's one person who says what goes into Mastodon, and if you don't get it in his stuff, then getting the adoption everywhere else is limited. So my worry is not that we get a privatized company, and another Elon Musk comes in and buys it. My worry is that we get sort of something like Mastodon, where it's an open protocol and an open thing, but nothing we can do works until Bluesky LLC supports it.
Right. Got it. And then I know we're kind of at the end of the time that we were planning to spend together, but just one last thing is, if you were thinking about what you see in Noster today, and I think people have a bunch of complaints around sort of maybe some of the performance or the confusion in UX or some of the discovery surfaces not being as familiar as like a service like Bluesky is able to provide. Is there anything that you see in Noster today that you think is limiting to what Noster can accomplish around areas like discovery or simplified UX, simplified login, maybe simplifying key management, search, discovery, etc.? Like, can Noster over time build the layers to get to a kind of Twitter clone-like experience, or is that are there sort of some gaps that you see?
I mean, I think we can get there. There's a lot of things that are difficult. For example, we don't have a good way of discovering what relays people are using. And so Pablo launched this thing, Purple Pages, which is a crawler that goes and only stores and serves specific event types about what relays you're using. It's great. But probably what we need is that also to be pushed into a DHT, so you could say, this npub, what are their relays? And like,
Mm-hmm.
as you change what relays, you push a signed event up into this DHT, which is like, these are my relays right now. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that. We need a good contact matching system so that you can say, who are my friends on this system? What are the relays they're using? These are their phone numbers or their email addresses, everything else. And we need that to be privacy preserving. And which means we probably need to stand up one or more services that run the software that Signal's using, having done some investigation of that. We need to, like, people are confused about what relays are. They'll all be confused. We either need to make it not matter, which is kind of what Damus does by just giving you the Damus relay, or we need to build the UI that helps users understand better which ones they're using and why you would choose one or the other. It's an easier problem than choose your Mastodon server. But, and I think we need, like, what I would really like is better end-to-end encryption. I want us to have private groups. I want us to figure out a way in which we can have encrypted DMs that hide the sender and the receiver. But I want there to be, I want there to be groups on Nostr. I want you to be able to have groups, and I want those groups to optionally be encrypted so that you get privacy. And
do you find
I don't know
those to
that's
be
holding it back,
important? Do you find those to be important features of kind of the relay client model of Noster, or is that a different type of relay or some sort of different type of system that might be required to do kind of a really good private groups or private DM service?
I think it's just a matter of the event formats and the standards around it and like what we use the keys. Like I don't think we actually need to change the relays at all to do good private encrypted and encrypted groups. I think we have the tools. I think we need some libraries in different languages that client developers can drop in. So, each client developer is not going to want to re-implement the way that forward secrecy and double ratchet encryption and key rotation and all that stuff works. We need to build some libraries out, and we need to wrap them and make it easy for people to say, now I support this, the private groups. But I think that the relays and the message stuff, that actually could just exist just fine. That's not a big deal.
Right. But it's a different profile of, carrier and like how many messages you might expect to get if you're really handling the private relay kind of private message use case well. You might generate, orders of magnitude more messages than kind of the posting oriented relay. So have you seen people who are working on kind of those more specific tunings or kind of specific, either clients or relay customizations that would support that?
So, Pablo's been working on some of that stuff, and now we have Pablo working full time doing Nostr development. So that's super exciting. There's been sort of scuttlebutt back and forth between, Amethyst and Damus over stuff like that. I think that, I wish everyone was nicer, but I think that we do need to figure out, okay, what's this, for this kind of social app, what do we support and how do we support it? And I think we have to not be afraid of breaking backwards compatibility. Like one of the things that Secure Scuttlebutt got held up by was trying to always be backwards compatible to some old messages and stuff. Like Noster is nice because the things sort of disappear, and so it means that we don't have to support everything that always existed. We can make old messages unreadable in the new system. That's fine.
Right.
So, but I think relay discovery, content discovery, finding your communities. And I think that the stuff that I've been doing with Jay from Sex Social in terms of how do we label content? How do we provide a structured label for content warnings and for reporting? And then and then how do we build into clients that ability to say, where do I want my moderation? Like, who do I trust? Do I trust the people I follow? Do I trust the people who run the relays? Do I trust this other moderation service? Do I trust anyone who says this stuff? Do I only trust people who self-warn it? So I think we need to flush out that stuff, because that's the stuff that's going to help both, get mainstream adoption and get it so that people can join and say, I don't want to see Bitcoin memes, or I don't want to see the porn things. I have a list on my account of, I think it's like 30 or 40 Nostr porn accounts, and they're posting porn and things like that. I don't want to follow the porn accounts, but I think what they're doing is interesting. And so, but I want to be able to have them be able to label their own content. And I want to be able to either label it myself or have a relay that labels it, so that I can have the option of, hide it all, or, gray it out and let me click through. So I think that we need to do those things. And I think if we start taking off and we don't have the handle for reporting content, following up on it, understanding it, giving users an empowered to choose what system they want, then we'll get overwhelmed by spam and overwhelmed by, the Pepe the Frog folk, like the 4chan folks who are like just trolling to try and see if they can disrupt a community. Like, we're vulnerable to that. And so we need to build better tools so that they can go disrupt themselves and we don't have to be bothered by it.
Right. Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. It's I think your thinking on this is, obviously you've spent a lot of time at it and you've met all the players and sort of have a well-formed opinion. So it's great to get a chance to really catch up on this particular topic. But I also want to just invite you whenever's convenient, whenever you're ready, you want to talk more about the stuff you're building. I'd love to get deeper on that too.
Yeah, I would love to do a deep dive on it and keep talking. Just before this call, I was talking to the woman who used to run a bunch of the trust and safety stuff at Facebook. And I want to set up a call with her where she tells us in Noster all the crazy shit they dealt with, because we need to figure out how to do it in a decentralized anti-censorship way, because it's coming. So there's a lot of interesting comments, and I really appreciate your podcast and having me on and being able to talk about it, and the receptiveness of folks in the Nostr community to realize this stuff is complicated, and we like to play teams and have sides and have tribal stuff, but the truth of the matter is all the open protocols, we're on the same team.
Yep, 100%. Yep. I think that's a message. That's a great one. And I've been saying it in private to people that, hey, we're really all on the same team here. We maybe have different perspectives and approaches, but everybody's kind of rowing toward the same goal, and just like a lot of experimentation, stuff gets tried out. And, I think ultimately, if the goal is reached, how it actually gets there is not super important. Like, we can all, agree that, one particular protocol or approach may get us there faster. Over time, that probably becomes more obvious, and so we sort of coalesce around that one. But yeah, we're all we're all team open.
What we need to do is make sure that things like Sproutable, Tribble, T2, Post News, the new thing that Kevin Systrom is doing, which I forget the name of, it starts with an A, or the unnamed artifact, or the yet unnamed Instagram Twitter clone. That, like, those are the people we should be worried about, because those are the people who want to create a new captured ecosystem that just puts them at the top. And so we need to learn from, collaborate, and support everybody on Team Open.
100% Team Open. Let's go.
Awesome.